Hello everyone, I'm Bejar Dabbagh, and tonight on Target we delve into the Middle East, focusing on the military and political dominance of the United States, a leading global and regional power. Recent events suggest that the United States is not only aware of change in the Middle East, but may have played a part in shaping them. In Syria and across the region, the U.S. remains a key player. Joining us tonight is Mr. Mark Kemet, a former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, who will offer his insights into the ongoing developments in the Middle East and U.S. foreign policy and the border strategy toward Syria and the Central East. We will explore how the U.S. might respond to military movements, especially in Rojava, the arrival of Turkish-backed fighters, and the current situation in Gaza and Israel as well. We will also discuss whether the war in Ukraine could end during a Trump presidency or it may continue further. Mr. Kemet, thank you for being here tonight. Let's start with Syria and Rojava. Based on your expertise, how do you view the change in the region after Bashar al-Assad's departure?
Yeah, I think it is yet undetermined and unknown as to the U.S. policy that we will be taking forward inside of Syria. It is clear that the Biden administration, soon after Damascus fell, sent a senior level State Department emissary to talk to Jawani al-Shara, the leader of HTS and now the leader of Syria. Obviously, what the United States wants to do is establish a relationship with the new Syrian government before either the Russians or Iranians come back, and candidly to ensure that it is not being, the new government in Damascus is not being run by external forces. On the specific issue of Rojava and the SDF, there are some hard decisions that need to be made. It's clear that al-Shara has said that there will not be federalism, so there will not be a similar situation to the federal region of Kurdistan. So there has to be a decision on which way the United States will go as regards their partner, the SDF, and the fight against ISIS.
Mr. Mark, given the uncertainty, it's difficult to predict Syria and Rojava's future. However, based on the initial developments, do you believe Syria under Ahmad al-Shara will endure, or will Trump's potential return and regional shifts lead to a change in the current regime?
Well, certainly the United States will not change the government in Syria. But just as President Biden did, I would expect President Trump to judge the new government in Damascus by its behavior, not by its words. Yes, you can put al-Shara in a suit, shave his beard, and have him wear very expensive Western shoes. But the question is, has he and will he renounce his previous affiliation with al-Qaeda and ISIS? So, with regards to the United States position towards Damascus, we will judge it by its behavior. We don't have a prediction of how long al-Shara will be in power. We're very cautious, given his background, whether he will enforce and embrace and allow a multicultural, multi-ethnic Damascus. So I think the best we can say right now is that Washington is in a wait and see, and we will judge Damascus by its behavior.
Another critical aspect of Ahmad al-Shar's leadership is addressing Syria's diverse communities. The Kurds, as a significant population in Syria, remains at the forefront. How is the United States supporting the Kurds in Syria during this transitional period?
Well, I think it's important to note that inside the new administration, you have senior officials coming in, such as Mike Waltz, the new national security advisor, who has a strong affection for the work that has been done by the SDF in our mutual fight against ISIS. So what I would say is the Kurds in northeastern Syria start off with friends in the new administration. But I think the U.S. also recognizes that there is another factor in this equation, and that's our relationship with Turkey as well. So I think the United States will try to be a fair intermediary between all parties, those in the Northeast, those in Damascus, and those in Ankara, to try to find a solution that works best with a minimum of conflict and a maximum of support for Syria as it transitions away from the dictator al-Assad into what we expect to be a multicultural, pluralistic society that doesn't differentiate by ethnicity, by religion, or by political views.
You mentioned the possibility of Trump mediating between Rojava and Turkey. However, Turkey continues to openly label the Kurds as a threat, regardless of location. How do you think the United States can balance reducing Turkey's opposition to the Kurds in Rojava?
Well, I think that the administration has honestly not looked too carefully into the situation right now. I would note, however, that the new ambassador in Ankara is a close friend of the president's. I think he will be listening very carefully to the Kurdish position and relay that to President Trump and his people. And of course, the military in the United States is probably the strongest voice for the Kurds in northeast Syria. It's clear that our policy is to avoid bloodshed. Our policy is to see stability inside of Syria. Our policy is that Syria will be run by the Syrians, not by external forces of other countries, of Russia, Iran, of Turkey, or for that matter, the United States. But the United States has a commitment to the Kurds that have fought alongside of us for so long. So any thought that the United States will abandon the Kurds, I think is not in the policy views of this administration.
Shifting focus to Iran, you highlighted its weakened influence in the region following the fall of Assad regime. Iran has expressed hope for stability under Trump's administration. What do you anticipate for the next 4 years regarding U.S.-Iran relations?
Well, again, we will judge Iran by its behavior. Iran has promised that they will never develop a nuclear weapon for military purposes, and the United States and the world, for that matter, will hold Iran to that obligation. Look, we have always been concerned about three elements inside of Iran's foreign policy. Number one, its nuclear program. Number two, its missile program. And number three, its operations outside of Iran through the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force. I think we need to look back to President Trump's last term when he conducted a targeted killing of Qasem Soleimani. That was the first building block that fell down, because Qasem Soleimani was the direct line between Tehran and Damascus and Gaza and southern Lebanon and the Houthis. He kept them under very tight control. Ghani, his replacement, has not been able to do that, which is why those countries have made such horrible mistakes, starting with the attack from Gaza into Israel, then the bombing of Israel by Hezbollah, then the shooting of rockets by the Houthis, and then the support to Syria. In that space, from the time that Qasem Soleimani was targeted to today, Iran has lost all of its foreign sanctuaries. It has lost all of its foreign allies. So Iran is in a much weaker place when it comes to the issue of creating instability in the Middle East. So now the Biden administration will say, okay, since they're no longer a destabilizing force in the Middle East, now it's time, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force, now we need to focus on their missile program. We need to focus on their nuclear program. Obviously, President Trump is a deal maker. He will look to make a better deal with Iran. If Iran chooses not to take that deal and abandon its nuclear weapons program, I think that President Trump recognizes the gravity of the threat and will support a coalition to put greater pressure on Iran to force it into that position.
Finally, the Trump administration is expected to differ significantly from Biden's approach to the region. How do you foresee Trump navigating relations with Russia in this new era?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that the only difference in the Biden policy for the Middle East and the Trump policy for the Middle East is that Biden primarily talked about it. President Trump will do something about it. Now, when we switch away from the Middle East up to Ukraine, look, the war has gone on for over 3 years now, almost 3 years. Hundreds of thousands have died. In many ways, parts of Ukraine look like Gaza. So it's time for an end to the war. And now the only question is, will the end of the war come through negotiations or through military operations? President Trump has said, let's try negotiations. I think deep down, even though they will never say it publicly, I think President Zelensky and President Putin are looking for a way out of this war that has cost so much in blood and in money. President Trump's view is that he will start a dialogue between Zelensky and Putin through his special envoy, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, and start the negotiations. The question is not whether there will be negotiations. There will be. All wars generally end with negotiations. The real challenge is, what are going to be the terms of the agreement? What will it mean with regards to the security status of Ukraine? Will they be allowed into NATO? What will be the status of the lands currently occupied by the Russians? Will there be an ability for the Russians to continue to control it? Will it become a buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine that's really not in anyone's control? So I think all of us recognize that Ukraine is beyond the point where one side or the other can win the war. So now let's see what the terms of an agreement can come about for the next phase in this conflict, which is negotiations.
That, in your opinion, is the United States opening the door to ending the Russian-Ukrainian war by stopping aid to Ukraine? Or will it negotiate first and then halt its aid to Ukraine?
I think negotiations will start. I think the United States position will be and should be, we will continue to support the Ukrainian military, as will Europe, until we see solid offers of negotiations and solid offers of settlement. You don't stop a war, cut off the support, and then go to the negotiating table. You fight your way to the negotiating table, and you let both sides no doubt recognize that they need to keep fighting until there's an agreement. Otherwise, it's just surrender at the negotiating table.
Very good. Let's move on to the most discussed topic of the last few days, the announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The ceasefire was expected to be announced during Trump's inauguration, but it was finalized in the last moments of Joe Biden's presidency. what can Trump do for Gaza and Israel? Will he end the war once and for all, or establish a long-term permanent ceasefire, or is there still a possibility of renewed violence during Trump's presidency 2017 to 2021? He was known as a strong supporter of Israel.
Yeah, well, first, to clarify your point, President Trump did not say, let's have a ceasefire after I come into office. He said, there must be a ceasefire before I come into office, or there will be hell to pay. And that's exactly what happened. It was remarkable and a remarkable sign of bipartisanship between the Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration that they allowed Steve Witkoff from President Trump's entourage to join the negotiating team, to send that message that if you don't agree to a ceasefire, both sides don't agree to a ceasefire before President Trump comes in, there will be hell to pay. I think that was a very good example of bipartisanship between an outgoing administration and an incoming administration. Number one, we got the ceasefire. Number two, one can make the argument that, like in American football, the Biden administration took the football 95 yards down the field, but it was the Trump administration that pushed that last 5 yards over the finish line.
Okay, Mr. Morg, I have a few minutes left and would like to shift our focus to Iraq and the Kurdistan region. You worked in Iraq in 2008 and 2009, so you have first-hand experience, of course. Now, Iraq is openly home to dozens of militias and armed groups, following the developments in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Some analysis suggests that Iraq could also be impacted by these changes. How do you assess the current situation in Iraq, which has so far been well managed by the Sudanese government? Where do you see Iraq heading?
Well, first of all, I would also like to clarify a point you made that I worked in Iraq in 2008 and 2009. I first came into Iraq in 2003 and have been going back and forth into Iraq up to and including a month ago. So I think I've stayed very current with the situation in Iraq. And look, the American policy about militias can best be summed up by a comment made by General John Abizaid when he was the commander of Central Command in 2003 to 2005. He said militias are the curse of the Middle East. When you have armed groups that don't answer to the central government, when you have armed groups that belong to political parties, they actually are a curse on the political system of a country. The U.S. policy is quite clear. The U.S. policy is that our position is that we work with Prime Minister Soudani and give him what he needs to bring those renegade militias under state control. The policy of the United States around the world is that the central government must have the monopoly on weapons and must have the monopoly on the use of force. But at the end of the day, it's also our policy that it's up to the people of the local country to come up with a way to do that process, that our attempt to impose that requirement from outside and to actually involve ourselves in the disarming of militias, in fact, merely strengthens the militias and doesn't weaken the militias. So we applaud the efforts that are being made by Prime Minister Soudani. We hope for progress in this. We will give whatever support we can short of our own use of force against the militias. And we hope to see a future where there are no renegade militias that don't answer to the central government in Iraq.
I appreciate that you are closely aware of the situation in Iraq. Let me ask, are American forces withdrawing from Iraq?
The United States has made a commitment under the Strategic Framework Agreement and the military discussions between our two countries that the Americans will withdraw from Iraq along the timeline that was established between the United States and the Iraqi government. We are here this time since 2014 based on an invitation letter from the government for assistance in aiding the central government as Iraq was being attacked by ISIS. I would note that Kurdistan did a pretty good job making sure ISIS did not come into its area. But nonetheless, our single mission inside of Iraq has been to fight ISIS. It's at the point now where the military believes that the Iraqi security forces and the Peshmerga are capable of defending Iraq from the ISIS threat without the assistance of American boots on the ground. That is our current position. We will withdraw along the timeline. We will not force ourselves to stay. However, if the situation on the ground changes, the military committee between the two countries could always alter that timeline upon the mutual agreement of both countries. There is some question about whether the Syrian situation will require the American troops to help the Iraqi security forces defend their borders for a longer period of time, but there have been no decisions made. So the policy right now is we have an agreement with the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government wants us to withdraw the boots on the ground. The Iraqi government wants to continue to get intelligence support and perhaps some training support from civilian contractors. We're willing to do that. But if the American boots are on the ground beyond the agreement timeline, that's at the invitation of the Iraqi government, not at the demand of the American government.
My final question, General, it concerns the Kurdistan region. Are you familiar with the Iraqi Kurds and their current direction? What is your assessment of their situation at this stage? Given your experience working in Iraq, I would value your insight, of course.
Well, if you read the press releases coming out of Davos, it's clear that President Barzani is representing Kurdistan virtually as an independent and sovereign country. We, of course, know that that is not the case. And the future of Kurdistan is really a political discussion between Baghdad and Erbil. I think we all understood what happened in the last referendum when there was an independence referendum. But again, that's an internal matter for the people of Iraq to decide upon, and a decision on that, or in fact, a position on that in terms of what America prefers, it will not be delivered. That to us remains an internal matter for the people of Iraq to decide how they want to treat their governing structures, their border disputes, and other issues such as that.
Thank you so much, General Mark Kemet, former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Channel 8, and thank you, dear viewers. Thank you as well for watching.